Yet we see them, Rita and James, tearing down statues. Here they are tearing down Christopher Columbus. Just have a look. Now, please explain to me in what way that helps anybody.
It doesn't. And just, by the way, to the previous point, I'd point out that 82% of the new immigrants to the United States, which actively seeks out these immigrants, are non-white. The idea that the United States is some systemically racist country just falls on every single level, not just the economic ones that Rita talked about, but these statue pull-downs, which are happening around Australia. There were people even in Australia who were trying to do that to Cook's statue the other night, and a good shout-out, I think, to the New South Wales police the other night who protected that monument against this sort of vandalism, and that's the only word for it. This is cultural vandalism, and I think it really tends to take us in the direction of the Cultural Revolution that China saw in the 1960s. This is about smashing what they called in those days the four olds, you know, old ways of thought, old thinking, old this, old that. This is about rewriting history, and it's a Cultural Revolution moment. Now we are seeing even streets renamed. There was that plaza outside the White House, which they renamed Black Lives Matter Plaza. That's what the mayor of Washington, D.C. did as a way to stick a thumb in the eye of Donald Trump. But now we're seeing street names rewritten in Britain, elsewhere, because of some perceived possible connection to something dodgy in the past. Even Penny Lane, which I think was a famous Beatles song, Rowan, you would love this and know all about it, has been cancelled because apparently the penny that it was named after may have been a penny in the past who may have been connected with that same slave trade that the very evil United Kingdom and the very evil British Navy actually worked to stamp out in the 19th century, but the history people don't want to hear about that.
Or, James, it might have been the price of a fish and finger pie back in the 1960s. But anyway, that's one for the Beatles fan.
Yeah.
James, tell us also about the way one of these statues, the stupidity of so many of these vandals and these looters.
I mean, this is where it just gets to be completely nuts and shows that they actually don't care about, you know, any sort of nuanced look at history. One of the statues that got pulled down in London the other day was of a fellow named Matthias Baldwin. Now, this is in Philadelphia, in the United States, and it was a guy named Matthias Baldwin who was a great pioneer of abolitionism, the cause of ending slavery. He spent all his money giving to do two things. Number one, abolish slavery, and number two, establish schools for African Americans, so to pay for the education of black children. And yet he got canceled. His monument got defaced. These people do not care about history. They do not care about facts. And, you know, it is just so disappointing to see that law enforcement hasn't been able to do something more about them because they really need to be put in their place.
Well, law enforcement, Rita, is kowtowing to them, kneeling in front of them. I saw a report this morning that the police in Britain have been told that if they that there will be trouble if they don't kneel in front of these thugs. We've got the lunacy of the police simply covering up statues if they're ashamed of them to try and prevent them being damaged rather than rounding up the perpetrators of the violence. They covered up statues of Churchill, Gandhi and even Martin Luther King, which shows what morons these Black Lives Matter and Antifa thugs are. But Rita, tell us about Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London.
Well, you don't need unruly mobs to tear down statues when you've got Sadiq Khan, the mayor, doing them for him. And he was very proudly promoting doing this. He tweeted out a video, I don't know if we've got the video there, of a statue of a slave trader, Robert Milligan, who's also known for other things, but his statue was removed from West India Quay, and Sadiq Khan organised that. That wasn't something that was done, and I wonder if was there approval for that from the constituents? Was there a vote taken? Was there any sort of discussion before he just went ahead and pulled it down before the protesters did? And he has been really fanning the flames of this crisis throughout the last 2 weeks. So irresponsible, and now that the right-wing protesters are out there causing mayhem and violence, he is speaking out against that. But the violence from the Black Lives Matter and Antifa and the rest of the protesters we've seen for 2 weeks, he was very reluctant to really say anything against that. And I think the British public is waking up to just this massive disconnect between popular opinion and the political media class and their treatment of this crisis.
You're right, Rita, and we'll chat to Nigel Farage about that later on in the show. You're absolutely right to point that out. I've been astonished, Rita and James, by the hypocrisy of some of the people around this, which is really so disappointing. The whole story about the Rhodes Scholars, Cecil Rhodes, the Rhodes Scholarship. We had an Australian, the first Indigenous Australian to receive the Rhodes Scholarship. Other people, by the way, who have received Rhodes Scholarships include, of course, famously Bob Hawke, Tony Abbott and others. But this is the first Indigenous Australian, and well done on her getting this scholarship. She's turned round and done an article saying, oh, no, the statues should fall. And she's gone through the most extraordinary sophistry, if you like. I won't go through her argument because basically it doesn't stand up, much like the statue, really. But she tries to draw a distinction between honouring the scholarship and honouring the individual who pays for this or paid for the scholarship. So the hypocrisy is staggering. You're allowed to keep the scholarship but tear down the statue.